This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the GGATT Association of Trinidad and Tobago as we present World Mental Health Day 2022. And joining us is Dr. Philip Kerrigan. Unfortunately, Professor Lena, how do I pronounce her surname, Philip?
Gaga.
Gaga, thank you very much. Professor Lena Gaga could not be here with us, but she sends her regrets. And of course, we are still grateful that she tried to be here. We would begin now with the opening prayer led by Miss Abia Smith. Abia, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Abia Smith, a ranger guide from 12 Port Spain Ranger Unit, and I am here representing the younger population. Bow your heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for life. We thank you for health. We thank you for strength. Lord, I ask you to guide us through our day, guide us through this session, Lord. And Lord, I ask that everything that we learn, that we retain in it and we practice it. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. And thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. And now we have Dr. Philip Kerrigan. Permit me to introduce Dr. Kerrigan by way of his biography. Can we share the screen, please? Thank you. Philip Kerrigan is project manager at the University of York. He is a research project manager in the Department of Health Sciences at the University of York. He is currently working with Professor Lena Gaga and others on the GGATT study to develop, trial, and evaluate a new short therapeutic intervention for adolescents with mild to moderate depression that can be delivered by non-clinically trained professionals in schools and other community settings. His PhD, his doctorate, which he completed in 2008, explored the influence of the celebrated Victorian naturalist Charles Darwin on botanical art and garden design. His research interests have since broadened to include the sociobiology of human health and well-being, the history of medicine, and the relationship between mental health, the creative arts, and the natural world. Philip champions the involvement of patients, carers, and other members of the public with lived experience in the co-design, co-development, and dissemination of health research, and in 2020, co-authored an illustrated guide to patient and public involvement in research. He is particularly interested in and is involved with a number of projects looking at how mental health interventions and public engagement activities can become more culturally attuned and accessible, including by drawing on the creative arts and digital technologies. Before joining GGATT, Philip was project officer for the Center for Future Health at the university, where he was responsible for the development of public engagement projects and initiatives. In 2017, he was lead editor on a collection of essays exploring historical as well as current approaches to mental health across the globe, with links to the World Health Organization. He was also a leading figure on a project that developed and evaluated a set of lessons and resources to improve understanding of mental health, challenge stigmas, and promote protective behaviors within secondary school classes. So ladies, I now present to you Dr. Philip Kerrigan, who has asked that he be called Philip for today's proceedings. Over to you, Philip.
Oh, thank you, Joy, for such a lovely introduction. It's a real pleasure to be with you all here today. Thank you so much for inviting me. And yes, greetings from the north of England, where it's sort of winter now. And as I say, the sun is very low in the sky, and I actually had to close the curtains because yes, though it's quite mild at the moment, so that's nice for us. But yes, no, it's lovely to talk to you today. Apologies, my colleague Lena Gaga sends her apologies. She can't be with you, but she's given me her presentation that she would have been delivering. So hopefully I'll let you share that with you after I've spoken to mine. So I guess you after that you've had a bit of a sort of a biography of me from Joy, and yeah, I just sort of add a bit of a disclaimer, or kind of explain a bit the kind of basis on which I'm speaking to you today. I don't actually have a formal qualification in health sciences or psychology, but what I do have is lived experience of mental illness, and also of working on a lot of projects, research projects that link to the area of mental health, and also to a number of projects that are about engaging members of the public with research and getting them to sort of reflect on it and think on it, and also more sort of generally to raise awareness and understanding of mental health issues, and particularly projects with young people, with adolescents. Both one of those I'm working on at the moment, which is this combat project that was mentioned at the beginning of my biography, that's about developing a short intervention for adolescents that can be delivered in school settings and rather than sort of mental health clinical settings. And it's about early intervention, identifying those young people who are sort of have got, whose mood is low but haven't developed serious depression, and then sort of giving them support in the hope that the symptoms then improve rather than reducing the chance of deteriorating. So I'll so the first my presentation that I'm going to share with you, and I'll just share my screen, is all about really just talking about awareness, increasing awareness of mental health. I just got it. So it's a series about sort of 2021 slides, and but I'll be pausing at various moments during the presentation to try and make it a little more interactive and involve you and sort of ask you some questions, because I'm not quite sure how much you kind of know already about sort of mental health and mental illness, perhaps more than you think. But I think it's good to sort of, we'll see, take it how it comes along. And yeah, as I said, I'll ask you at some points to just pause and have a think about a few questions. And then if you wanted to write something down or even share your thoughts with the rest of the group, that would be really nice. But I don't want to put any pressure on any of you either. Right. So, hello, Joy. You've just got a quick question there.
Yes, please. In terms of the interaction, would participants be able to ask questions throughout the course of the presentation, or would you prefer that they wait until after the presentation?
You can interrupt at any time, just raise your hand at any time, especially if there's something that isn't unclear, what you'd like me to explain a little further. Yes, please do. But obviously once, after the presentation, then I'm obviously plenty of time to answer any questions that you have. But yeah, if there's anything that strikes you whilst I'm going through it and you think, oh, I don't understand that, or can you repeat that or explain that a bit more, then yeah, just pop your hand up and hopefully I'll see it, or Joy will see it and let me know. That sounds all right.
Thank you.
That's great. I think we've still just got some people coming in. So that's great. So that's nice. Great. So I'll just wait for you to admit those people. I think I can admit them too. I don't know. So that's
it's
great.
all good, Philip. You can continue. We'll admit them as it comes along, but you can begin now.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. Right. So yeah. So just to think first about what constitutes good mental health. What does enjoying good mental health mean? And I borrowed here a definition from the World Health Organization, that mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. And so I had to look at sort of a range of definitions, but I thought this was a nice one, partly because it encapsulates, I think, that idea of mental health being about being able to, cope and with the kind of the curveballs some curveballs that life sends you, and some of the challenges that you come across day to day without them taking an undue kind of emotional toll on you. And also because it was a kind of World Health Organization, it's a sort of a good sort of international definition rather than a UK kind of based one. And that idea of, you know, person being in a place emotionally where they can and psychologically where they're able to sort of realize their full potential and you know, and of course mental health and physical health and looking after them are equally important. There's a sort of saying over here from our National Health Service, no health without mental health, and a big push towards equality or parity of importance between mental health and physical health historically in the UK, and I'm sure I know in many other countries as well. Mental health has been a sort of second class sort of, you know, underfunded sort of health service with much less underinvested compared to physical health. But the things that are changing, there's more of a recognition of the importance and indeed the interconnectedness between mental and physical health, and how you cannot have one really without having the other. And you'll see when we talk a bit later how, you know, mental health challenges and illnesses quite often have a lot of physical symptoms associated with them. So one very important point is that mental illness affects everyone in one way or another, and anyone can become mentally unwell. So even if you're not experiencing mental illness at the time, or are lucky enough never to experience, you would very likely know someone, a family or friend who has a mental health challenge. But also more generally, this is a really important issue in society. And it's really important that, you know, that society as a whole is mindful of the population's mental health, because as we saw in the first slide, in order to have a sort of happy and well-functioning and coherent and successful and productive society, you need to make sure that your population is mentally healthy, because mental health problems are one of the kind of most major causes of people not being able to work. So there's all that sort of lost productivity and sort of, you know, inability to kind of use your talents and contribute to society, apart from it being, you know, a very unpleasant experience for the individual. So Joy, yes.
So Philip, let me ask something on behalf of the membership, because in Trinidad and Tobago, we tend to think that when you think about mental health, you're thinking about someone who has been committed to an asylum, or someone who is quote unquote going off their rockers. Is that mental health? Is that the absolute definition of poor mental health, I should say?
So the definition of mental health I'm using is a lot broader. So I'm not going to sort of even cover kind of more serious mental health disorders in this presentation. What I'm going to look at, because, you know, so once to our session this morning just wouldn't do justice to it, because they're very sort of complex issues. So what I'm looking at is more sort of what we call common mental health disorders that you know, affect a large proportion of the population at one time or other. It depends from country to country, but the figure is that at one time, you know, 1 in 10 people can be experience this, and that includes young people. And these common mental health disorders, one which is depression in a kind of mild or moderate version, and the other is anxiety. So these wouldn't be things at all for which a person was committed to an asylum or would need sort of inpatient treatment at all. Typically what they would receive, and I'll talk about a possible treatment, popular or effective treatment for these conditions for depression a bit later on. But it's kind of community support. It would be sort of low a low impact intervention, you'd call it. So it would be something like counselling, really. You'd go and talk to a therapist and they would help you discuss the things, the emotions you were struggling with, or the thoughts or anxieties you're struggling with, and they would talk them through you and help you to identify strategies to kind of manage these better. But I'll kind of be covering it in this in due course. But yeah, that's an important point. Thank you, Joy, to mention that you know, there are kind of more severe mental illnesses, but even many of those you wouldn't necessarily in the UK at least need inpatient treatment. A lot of people can sort of get better from them with kind of outpatient treatment, maybe a mixture of medication, a mixture of kind of various kind of talking therapies. So does that help? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, just brilliant. Thanks, Joy. So yes, to start off with depression, which you know you could otherwise refer to as persistent low mood. So actually, I was gonna hand it over to you folks for a bit to sort of ask you, what do you think this means, and what might this look like? What would you expect to see from someone who was experiencing low mood? What sort of behaviors might you see, or what sort of signs would you see? Shall I give you just a couple of minutes just to think about that, and then if anyone was feeling brave enough to sort of put their hand up and kind of just their thoughts, to share their thoughts.
Ladies, please feel free, raise your hands, unmute your mics, and share your thoughts and your sentiments. Thank you.
So again, how would you tell that someone was depressed or low mood? Yeah, Abia. Do you want to go first?
So depression is like a mixture of moods. Sometimes you might see the person happy, sometimes you may see the person down, and like depression, it could cause them to harm themselves because they may not want to speak to somebody about it.
Yes, that's a good observation. So it's not necessarily, we'd say that they were kind of down a lot at the time, but there may be moments where their mood lifts for a bit. So it can also be quite challenging and hard to kind of spot these signs, because sometimes people do what called masking. So they can be quite good at hiding their feelings. Putting on a brave face is an expression you might have heard of. So you know, and it can be hard sometimes for the person looking at them to see the kind of the pain that or sadness they're experiencing underneath, because they're presenting a happy, smiling face to the world, and it's more perhaps when they're in private that they're kind of that then their emotions surface. And then also your point about worrying about talking to somebody, you know, feeling hesitant for whatever way to share this, because maybe you're kind of ashamed of these feelings, or you feel guilty, you feel like you shouldn't be feeling this way. But that kind of not sharing how you're feeling can be counterproductive. It can mean that you sort of feel more isolated and more frustrated, and because you not necessarily, especially as a young person, got the kind of the skills, the ability to think these things through yourself, or to kind of, or the strategies to deal with that. So that's great. Yeah. Anyone else? There was one other hand, but it sort of went down again.
I saw Nicole. Nicole Highland, you can respond now.
Hi, good morning. Actually, there is an individual. The person is living in the past, and she's afraid to go forward with life in reality. And she's shutting her best friends out, that kind of thing.
She wasn't her best friend. She's shut into her best friend's house. I see. She's not coming outside, so she's sort of she's isolating from other people apart from her best friend and from the world around her. So yes, that's also an important characteristic of depression. So I'll just move on. So when a therapist or a clinician or someone kind of looking to make a diagnosis of depression would look for two key symptoms. The first is feeling low, sad, or irritable for most of the time. So not just kind of one-off low mood or having a bad day or something, something bad happens, or the person has a bad day and they feel down, but then usually you sort of bounce up again. It's when this feeling of low kind of persists over a number of weeks, even into months. And then the second symptom is losing interest in taking no pleasure in day-to-day activities, even things you'd normally enjoy, so sort of hobbies and things you do for fun, and also no longer enjoying interacting with other people. So in depression, it's very common for people to sort of use the expression retreat into their shell. So they would kind of withdraw. Maybe if it's a young person or a teenager, they would spend all day in their bedroom and not come out, and spend a lot of it just dozing in bed or not really doing anything very active or productive. And I say sort of not meeting up with friends or going out or even really interacting that much with their parents or their siblings. And not doing sort of hobbies that they would normally enjoy, whatever those might be, a particular sport or I don't know, some art if they're into art, or playing an instrument. So those are the kind of two key symptoms of depression that we look for. And then there are a number of other symptoms as well that are often accompany this condition. And 4 of these we describe as being mind related. So having difficulty concentrating or paying attention or making decisions, finding even kind of what to put on and wear in the morning becomes a struggle. You're thinking, oh, I wear this, but then did I wear this the other day? Does it need wash? So you just sort of overthink about even the kind of smallest things. And similarly, if you're kind of at school, you might find it difficult kind of concentrating on your work and getting the motivation, just kind of focus. And then another can be blaming yourself, so feeling a lot of guilt even when there's no reason you should feel guilty, because thinking you've done bad things, or you're not performing well enough when you are, or disliking yourself. So there's something about yourself that you don't like. You think you're the wrong. I don't know, you're not attractive in some way, or as I say, you're that some personal quality you're lacking in, or you're too impatient a person, or that can be often linked to kind of comparing yourself to other people. So and so is much more popular, or more, and it's when we all do that from time to time, but it's when we're sort of doing this all the time and it comes towards us not feeling happy with who we are. And then feeling hopeless about the future. So, hope is such an important ingredient in your life for happiness. So if you start feeling, pessimistic all the time and thinking, oh, I'm not looking forward to tomorrow or next week because only something else bad is probably going to happen, or nothing good, or there's nothing to look forward to. And then in more, serious cases, you can even think about, thinking about death and, is life, question the value of your life, or self-harming. But that's hopefully problems are caught before it kind of reaches that stage. And then you have these 4 symptoms that are kind of more body related. Remember I said earlier about the mental and physical health being closely related, not being 2 discrete areas. So having trouble sleeping, because you're kind of finding it hard to get to sleep, or you don't have good quality sleep, you wake up a lot, or you have bad dreams, or alternatively just sleeping too much, again because you're feeling just lacking motivation and energy to go out and do things. You're feeling tired all the time and just spending all the time in bed and snoozing. And then problems, kind of eating related problems. So either your appetite goes away and you possibly lose weight, or you're eating too much of comfort eating, trying to get sort of some kind of pleasure or stimulus from food, because that's maybe one of the last things that kind of gives you kind of pleasure or enjoyment, and then you kind of gain weight, but then that can kind of, you know, mean your sort of your self-esteem is affected. So, and then feeling sluggish and slowed down, similar to, you know, having energy, or alternatively, you're feeling kind of agitated and on edge. So these are these kind of more kind of bodily symptoms. So I had just another quick reflection exercise, thinking, you know, if you saw, you know, a friend who was showing some of these signs of depression, how do you think you would react? And how do you think you would react to that? Do you want to, again, just have a minute or so just to think about that? And then maybe if somebody would like to sort of volunteer what they think might be the sort of how they react if they saw someone, you know, day on day looking kind of upset or withdrawn and not, you know, sort of, you know, in the classroom, they're going off on their own and they're not sort of, you know, engaging with the rest of the group and that sort of thing. How would you react to that? Nicole?
I would try to start a conversation, but would listen more, because I need to know where the person is at.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Anyone else got any thoughts? No. Yes, Deborah.
Yes, maybe in a situation where you feel that you cannot help, you could probably seek help, get someone to help, like a professional person to help that individual.
That's brilliant. Yeah, no, that's a really good observation too. Absolutely, definitely. Okay, well, we can come back to that later. But yeah, here's some thoughts. Every now and again, here we go. So yes, you see the what you've suggested. Oh gosh, I've gone two now. Trying to move my my panel where I see people away from the text, so I can see people at the same time, but also see my presentation. So yeah, as you said, Nicole, it's about listening, acknowledging how the person's feeling, not denying them and saying, oh, why are you, or challenge it, saying, why are you upset? There's nothing to be upset about. You need to listen and try and step into their shoes and try and understand why it is that they're kind of they're upset or depressed about something, and avoiding being critical or judgmental, because we've kind of all done this sometimes. You don't see the kind of pain that the person experiencing underneath, and so you're thinking, oh, what's the matter with you? Can't you just sort of bounce out of it? Why are you sort of, you know, sometimes people, you can think, oh, they're just being a bit mopey or something, but actually that they can make more of an effort, but actually maybe they are already making a lot of effort to just kind of keep themselves together, and you know, and actually how they're feeling is worse than how they're looking. So, and it's, you know, it's too much. They cannot actually, you know, just find at that particular point in time, find the energy or the motivation to sort of, you know, be happy and be active. So yeah, and as you said, listen sympathetically what they have and explore possible ways that they might possibly move forward, but avoiding, again, sort of telling them what to do. So it's to kind of maybe suggesting things, but sort of drawing out of them possible solutions or things that might help them. So and we'll come again to question the sort of things that those might be, but the general principle is to try to enable the person to start doing things again, to start engaging with other people, and to start doing activities again, even if it's just small amounts. So if they used to play, I don't know, a particular game, I don't know what's a popular women's sport in Trinidad and Tobago? Swimming? So if they used to maybe
Swimming, football,
running,
cricket.
football, yeah, brilliant. So if they used to go, play football every Saturday morning or something, sort of, trying to encourage them maybe to come back one Saturday and say, see how you find it, kind of thing. We've really missed you, kind of thing. Would be great to see. But also, yeah, as you said, Deborah, encourage them to talk to a trusted adult. If there's not maybe if in a school, if there's a school counsellor or a member of pastoral staff whom they can talk to. And you could ask, if there's anything practical you could do to help, but it's important to be prepared to say no if what you're being asked to do kind of makes you feel uncomfortable or you think this isn't reasonable or sensible. So you've just got to use your common sense, as they'd say in Yorkshire, where I'm from there. And then, yes, obviously you've got to sort of think of your own mental well-being as well and safety. So if the person becomes very distressed or angry, especially as a young person, it's best to then leave, because you don't want yourself to get harmed or to risk making the situation worse, and instead to notify an adult that you know and trust. So if it's in school, a teacher, typically. Don't push yourself out of your own kind of personal depth. So the other, yes, that's depression. The other common mental health problem that I wanted to talk about is anxiety, and this is, as I'll say, there's a slide that says this later, but actually the two often come together. Yeah, what do you understand by anxiety? How would you define anxiety, or someone feeling anxious? What would you expect to see? Any volunteers? Nicole?
Well, I believe that person will be very impatient, wanting it to happen immediately, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that could be a symptom of anxiety, because it's the sort of the uncertainty of what's going to happen, and for an anxious person can be very hard, which makes them impatient to sort of to find a resolution that's right, to sort of sort something out rather than wait and have this doubt hanging over them. Yeah, Deborah again. Yeah.
That person sometimes becomes very, very restless, and they have to have this, they sort of act in a sort of panic way. They're very panicky and restless.
Absolutely. So they would seem very kind of agitated and sort of stressed and sort of unsettled and sort of maybe sort of, muttering in various, Michelle, am I pronouncing that right?
Yes. Talk about heart palpitations.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, so there'd be might be sort of physical symptoms as well. That's right, absolutely. Palpitations. Yeah. And Leona?
Hello, this is Leona, Mom, speaking on behalf of her. Nervousness.
Hello.
Nervousness.
Nervousness. Yep, absolutely. That's another good one. Absolutely. Yep. Palpitation. Brilliant. Thanks so much. So so let's just restlessness, sense of dread, sense of something bad being about to happen, not necessarily sure exactly what that is, but a sense of something bad is coming this way. Difficulty concentrating, and that sort of overlap with the depression, because you've got all these intrusive thoughts or anxieties are worrying. You're trying to get down to task, but you're worrying if you've said something to someone that's maybe upset them, or you're worrying about well, sometimes I do, if I remembered to lock the door properly when I left to go to work, that sort of thing. And then irritability, because you've got all these anxious thoughts going around your head, it sort of makes you very impatient in a sense of other things that are coming in. It's hard to deal with other people's questions and demands when you've got all these kind of critical or anxious thoughts in your own head going around. So it can be, and that's tiring as well, which can also make you irritable. And then persistent worrying and overthinking things, particularly worrying about things that, that you've said something you've done, being either on, I mean, it can be quite often linked to being an over-conscientious person. Being conscientious is good, and having a conscience is obviously a very good thing, but sometimes it can go into overdrive and give you too hard a time, and you sort of start questioning yourself all the time. Did I, as I say, did I do this thing right? Did I quite get this right? So yeah, and then this idea of catastrophizing. So a catastrophe is something that's very bad. So again, it's related to the sense of dread. It's imagining that the worst is going to happen. So you sort of I don't know, miss the bus for school or something in the morning, and you're thinking, oh, not only am I going to get into trouble, but this, maybe I'll get a suspension, or my parents going to be furious with me, and just imagining all these terrible consequences. And maybe actually missing the bus wasn't your fault, because you had to stop along the way to be a good Samaritan, help someone, or there was some kind of obstacle which meant you couldn't get to it. So it's this kind of this kind of thing. And then thinking of symptoms of anxiety, say kind of dizziness, tiredness, because obviously it's exhausting having this kind of mental, all these thoughts always racing around your head, and trying to sort of think them through and reassure yourself that the worst isn't going to happen, and try and sort of, if you worry, work out all the time how you're going to address these worries and avoid these bad consequences happening. Feeling tense, so tension, obvious tension, aches and pains. It can sometimes translate, that's into the sort of mental pain could translate into sort of physical aches and pains, particularly in stomach ache or headaches. Again, difficulty sleeping, because obviously if you've got all these racing thoughts or worries, it stops you getting to sleep at night. They keep you awake. And again, if you do get to sleep, you maybe have bad quality dreams. These kind of worries carry on into your dreams, anxieties carry into dreams. And then, as say, shortness of breath, trembling, heart palpitations, racing heart. So yeah, it can be quite disabling. Well, both anxiety and depression. And as I say, they very often come together if you're low, or if you're feeling low in mood, and very often that's the point at which you start becoming anxious at things, or pessimistic in your outlook, or thinking that bad things are going to happen. So and conversely, when you're anxious and worrying about things a lot, that can lower your mood. That can be depressing after a while, because you think, oh, I'm always going to be worried or anxious about these things. So yes. I just noticed I've got quite a few things in the chat. Are these questions, or? Oh no, they're just kind of, that's fine. They're just kind of various things. So yeah, I was going to think, I suppose maybe it's worth pausing then just to see if anyone has any particular thoughts or questions that struck them around, the kind of signs and symptoms and ways kind of we can experience depression, low mood, or anxiety. If not, that's fine. We can go on to, thought I'd talk next about, what sort of are the risk factors, or what can make it more likely that you become depressed, or that you would experience anxiety. So yeah, I'm going to hand this over again. Actually, just what do you think might sort of trigger you to sort of experience these things? Nicole? Oh.
Well, currently it's a death in the family that I'm seeing it from somebody who had a major family member who passed away.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good example. Yeah, Habia?
So it can be not doing well in your exams or not getting the job you wanted to get.
Yeah, that's an important to think where if you think, yeah, you have these things that you value are very important, these life goals, and you perceive that you're not making the progress towards them that you wanted to. Yeah. Joreen, am I saying that right?
Yes. Yeah, changes in finance, your finances.
Yeah, another very important one. That can be a big source of worry. You know, having financial worries can reduce that. Giselle?
Trauma or abuse.
Yes, yeah, very important one. Yeah, absolutely. Trauma and abuse to everyone. Yeah, that, yeah. And Deborah?
For the young ones, whenever there's a divorce in the family, when parents divorce, what children tend to do, they blame themselves for, the divorce when the parents divorce.
Yes, again, that's another very good example. Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, yeah, so if I just run through a list here, you'll see that all the good things you've been suggesting are appearing here. So exposure to trauma, yes, some sort of traumatic incident, especially, you know, earlier on in life when you are a young person. And that could be, you know, take many different shapes or forms. It could be some sort of, you know, physical trauma, that's a bad accident or a violence from someone else, or it could be, you know, and then I suppose linked a bit to that is kind of bullying, but that's kind of more like a low grade, if you like, abuse. That's like, but even constant verbal bullying can take a toll, sort of that's over time. It can really hurt your self-esteem and lead you to question your own value and worth, which obviously has a depressing effect on and can make you prone to anxiety. Not having a reliable support network around you, so not having, you know, people who you can turn to and say, you know, I've had a really tough time today, and or something really bad has happened. Can I cry on your shoulder a bit? And you know, and someone who just kind of help, you know, pick you up a bit and give you encouragement and motivation and say, don't take mind of what they say. You are a valuable and good person, and if they're being horrible, they're probably partly because they're jealous of you or they're insecure and have problems themselves and bad things happening in their own life. So important to have those kind of people around you. Insecure environments, a bit related to that, and that comes to the point about, you know, if you're experiencing constant financial hardship or worries, so you're also worrying about, you may have heard there's something called in psychology called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and these are kind of psychological needs for kind of love and affection and sense of belonging, but also kind of more sort of, if you like, economic needs. You need for a kind of financial stability and somewhere, you know, shelter and warmth. But that you're probably short on warmth most of the time in the Caribbean, but yeah, it's these sort of things. And then, yeah, as well, kind of making excessive demands either of yourself or someone else, making excessive demands of you. So it's that, again, relating to that perfectionism. So you're setting yourself unrealistically high demands, and that could be in terms of academic or sporting achievement, or even kind of, you know, in terms of behavior, you know, because, you know, we all slip up sometimes, and if you expect yourself to be perfect or beat yourself too much up, if you do go wrong, then that can be counterproductive. And then genetics also enters in. So some people are more more prone by virtue just of inheritance of genes to experiencing mental health problems. Quite which genes are responsible is still something that you know, is being researched, and genes do not determine your life. You know, just because you're more susceptible to something doesn't mean that you have to necessarily, you know, you can't get past that or can't get better. And then, yeah, a big one is, of course, stigma and lack of understanding. So the sort of the fact that there can be reluctance to talk about mental health or to share if you're feeling anxious or depressed, because there's this kind of shame sometimes attached to it, or this feeling that you have to be strong or manage things on your own, or this fear that, you know, that somehow if you that it might develop into something more serious, or you're going to be kind of late, people are going to think you're mad or strange or other, and they kind of, as a result, you'll be sort of cut off from them. So these things again can sort of, if there's a kind of incipient, a starting sort of, you know, condition, you know, stigma can stop a person going forward and seeking help and seeking support from others, and then that's when problems can get worse. Or if they do come forward and people are unsympathetic or respond in the wrong way or don't understand, you know, that it is, that what they're experiencing is very real for them, and it is, you know, has to do with kind of brain chemical levels in your brain, as well as the kind of environment and circumstance you're in. If they don't see it like a physical illness, you can't imagine you break your foot and you go to someone, they say, oh, that's your fault, or maybe. It's yeah, it's the same thing. It's treating them in the same way. So, and then think about as well, thought about things that can increase the risk of your developing things. There are also factors, we call them protective factors, things that can help protect you from becoming anxious and becoming depressed. And these kind of, in some ways, these are the opposite of the things that cause the risk. So education, improving education and understanding around mental health, you know, dispelling the myths and the fears and the prejudices around this, saying that it's, you know, that it has this physical element in terms of you can actually see changes in the way the brain works, and the depressed person, their brain isn't working as well. There's not the right balance of chemicals there. But then also, you know, misconceptions that, you know, around that, you know, if someone is ill, they're kind of potentially dangerous to you. That's rarely the case, actually. And just understanding again about the best ways of supporting and people who are unwell, and what causes this. Gone too far. So developing social and coping skills. So understanding yourself, what's going on when you're anxious or depressed, because it can be very scary. You know, you go from, you know, a normal level of anxiety. We all worry about some things occasionally, to finding you're worrying more and more, and this becomes quite alarming to you. Think, why is this happening? But if you kind of can recognize that why that's happening, and then have these strategies or techniques for managing that, and I'll come to what those are in a moment, then it's these so-called coping skills, and that reduces the risk of you really developing these problems developing. Then healthy lifestyle is important, so getting the right amount of sleep, exercise, fresh air, of having a healthy and balanced diet.
Hi, Philip. Excuse me, sorry to disturb. I think I saw Angela's hand raised.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, thank you. Thanks for spotting that, Joy. Yes, Angela.
Yeah, I was going to wait. No, from what you were saying, I had a question, and I just wanted to find out. I know some people talk about being bipolar, and I wanted to know if that was a cause or effect of mental health, since what you were saying about the risk factors.
Yeah, so bipolar disorder is it's a more kind of serious mental illness. So it used to be called manic depression, and why it was called that is because there's a tendency in one form of it, at least, to kind of alternate between a state of mind where you're excessively energetic and enthusiastic and happy, to feeling very depressed and very devoid of any kind of energy. And sometimes with it as well, that you can have this element of what's called psychosis. So it's kind of slightly losing touch with reality, slightly, you know, living inside your head, and there being a mismatch between how you perceive things outside world and how things actually are. So Yeah, it's a complicated condition, a serious condition. Historically it's quite often been associated with very talented and very artistic and creative people, and sometimes that creativity has actually come out of those kind of periods of mania. So but it's a very unpleasant condition for a person to have, and certainly if it gets, it can be very disabling in terms of their everyday functioning, how they interact with other people. So yeah, but it's it usually for that. It's usually quite sort of intensive psychological therapy for that, and possibly quite as well medication as well for that.
Thanks for the explanation.
You're welcome. So yeah, having a reliable support network. See the opposite of what I said before. Safe environment, again, that's just being, having a reasonable degree of financial security, a house over your head, not, being in a situation where you're sort of feeling under a constant threat. And I think a very important piece is kind of achieving balance in your life, so that everyone has different areas of importance for their life, maybe school or work or family, their friends, what we call self-care, time to yourself, doing your own hobbies. And it's important to think that there's a kind of a balance between you spend a proportionate amount of time between these areas, so you don't neglect any particular area of your life that is important. And also just kind of balance and moderation and things. So you're kind of moderate in the way you approach, food and exercise and other things and activities. You don't sort of focus just on one thing and do it all the time. And then, yeah, as I said, the importance of early intervention can't be overstated, so that this catching, problems at an early stage and intervening to reduce the chance of them escalating is, it's not only important for the individual because it saves them and their families and friends, it saves them, pain. It's important for society because, let's say, that mental illness, costs society so much in terms of lost productivity and obviously health services as well, and wasted potential. So yeah, coming towards the end of the slides, I realize I've been talking quite a long time now. It's been good to sort of get some feedback. But yeah, prevention, again, this is kind of relating again to the sort of what are protective factors, but things you can do to sort of reduce the chance of things that or how you can sort of stay well, ways of staying well. And the obvious thing is to sort of know what are symptoms of low mood and anxiety, and look out for these in yourselves and others, being attentive of it. So I think, when I was sort of 17, 18 and doing my A-levels, which are sort of like the sort of final school exams you do before you go to university in the UK, I was, working far too much, which is normally the opposite thing, isn't it? You're doing too little, but working too much can be counterproductive, because actually you sort of wear yourself out and you sort of start to doubt your competence and your abilities. So that I started to get a lot of anxiety around that and sort of making the grades and so forth, and also sort of various social anxieties as well. But I didn't really fully realize that, that there was something, that I was having a mental health experience, that it was something out of the ordinary. And because I didn't realize it, I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't share my problems. I sort of kept it all to myself and tried to manage it all myself, instead of saying, can I have a bit of help or advice on this? So when I went to university and I went away from home, most people in the UK go away from home, often to the opposite side of the country when they go to university. Although the environment in which I found myself was in many ways a lovely one, I in contrast to what I'd experienced at school, all the people I met were well, I mean, there were nice people at school as well, but they were very open, much more sort of, yeah, sort of friendly and out to be, and not sort of worried about status and just being, out to be friendly and pleasant. But without the sort of immediate family support network, and because it related to a previous time when I'd been at boarding school and was unhappy, I kind of carried away those worries and that depression over from the A-level year, and without the kind of realization myself of what was going on in support network and other people around me knowing what was going on, I sort of, I did eventually crash. So I had a nervous breakdown because, I wasn't able to kind of, that earlier intervention didn't happen. So that's why it's so important to be aware. And if I'd known, if I'd been taught about mental health at school, had greater awareness of it, then I would have felt more enabled to go forward and to, to talk to someone and get support. So I think that's very important. So yeah, knowing who you can turn for support and having the confidence to do that. Being kind to yourself and others is hugely important. Yeah, just again, sort of knowing that no one's perfect and you're going to slip up, and you feel you resolve if you do go around and make a mistake to learn from it, but there's no sense at all in beating yourself up about it constantly, and learning to forgive other people, because other people do and say things which are hurtful maybe in the heat of the moment, and it's not who they really are or really represents how they really feel towards you. So it's that, it's important to be able to sort of forgive others. I think sort of forgiveness and compassion are two of the most important things in the sort of human experience. So recognize your physical needs for sort of rest and exercise and nutrition, as again what I was saying in the previous slide. And then your psychological needs, again, for companionship, for friendship, for doing things for pleasure, but also having personal goals and getting the sense of achievement that comes from moving towards these. And you'll see this relates to a particular therapy which Lena was going to talk about and that I'm going to present later. And then I suppose these two overarching things, and again, this isn't scientific necessarily. This is kind of my own kind of observations and experience, and then sort of talking to other people and sort of looking back on when I was younger and what I'd like to have known or be more aware of then. And this thing, I'm sure you've heard of it, be true to yourself. Don't try to be someone who you're not, or try to, do activities or choose what you enjoy and what you're passionate about, your hobbies and stuff, because it matters to you, not because you think it's the popular thing to do or the cool thing to do. So focus on your own personal qualities, talents and interests, and build those up, and promise that will be rewarding. And then this thing of status anxiety. So worrying about, how other people see you, whether people look up to you, respect you. Thing is, if you focus on being, a good person and a kind and considerate person, then people who are similar will like you and will respect you, and those who don't, it doesn't really matter so much what they think, because you don't need their affirmation. So again, it's a hard thing to do. I think it's something we're all kind of learning to do throughout our lives, but it's, I think it is important in the long run to happiness and psychological well-being.
Hi, Philip. Excuse, I just wanted to find out something. Because
Yes.
our membership consists of a lot of younger persons, and particularly within the teenage years, is it realistic to tell teenagers avoid status anxiety? Because now we are bombarded by social media, we are bombarded by what we call social influencers. So is that realistic? Can they do that?
It's an excellent question, Joy. I would say it's very hard. I'd say there's maybe a cost to it, and maybe, if we're honest, there can be a short-term psychological cost. You may have to make a bit of a trade-off of popularity in some respects, possibly. But I think it's something that becomes easier when the older you get. Perhaps perhaps at school isn't the easiest time to do it. Fair enough, yes. But when you move beyond school, I think that is when I went to university, and maybe university is a slightly artificial environment because it's not school and it's not the world of work. It's a place uniquely, I think, where you are able to be yourself, and there isn't that pressure to conform or act a certain way, because you're in a big group of people and all together, and you don't know anything about anyone else's background, and there isn't that immediate pressure somehow to make, there aren't these power issues going on. So maybe it's quite idealistic, but I think it is. Yeah, as I say, this isn't scientific. I haven't run a scientific study to say, are people who reject, who say, I'm going to be an individualist and I'm going to be who I want to be and who cares what anyone else thinks, are more happy than those who are more concerned about, following fashion, following trends, about sort of, these things. But it's, so you can take and leave it. It's something to think about, maybe, whether it's, and something to kind of research yourselves and see whether it's something you think, if not helping you now, might help you, when you move into the next stage of your life. Is that fair?
Thank you. That is very fair, and it's very pragmatic, because the older you get, I think the less you care about what people think about you. You come into your own and you realize that who you are is more important than what people think of you. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joy. That's good. And then I just wanted to finish this section just on some practical strategies. So sort of some practical tips, really. So go from the very kind of philosophical to the very down to earth, as it were. And yes, when I did these slides, I put these. I don't know if you have apples in Trinidad and Tobago. I feel like they should be pineapples, but we didn't. You do get apples. I don't know if you can grow them, but maybe you import them over there. So yeah, one technique can be to create something called a happy memories box. So whenever you have a particularly, have a particularly enjoyable holiday or a particular enjoyable outing with friends or evening out or something, to kind of take some souvenir from that, or write down, how you felt during that or what happened, and then to pop it in a box, so that when you are feeling down or not so good at some time, you can take this box out and you can open it, and you've got all these reminders of happy things. And it may sound a little cheesy or corny, but it actually can work quite well, and just, reset your thinking and just remind you that though you're having a rubbish day today, there are times when that's going to be temporary. Tomorrow is probably going to be a lot better. And good things often do happen. And then this idea, sometimes people feel like things that are sort of sensory, so fidget toys, or sort of just things that you can sort of play with, or sometimes particular smells or things, can evoke positive sensations, or even kind of sounds. And that's by sort of going out into, if you have a sort of natural space as well, and just sort of, looking, again, this is not something that really appeals to teenagers, but as you get older, you may find this appeals to you, just enjoying things like plants and greenery, because they're visually appealing, they often smell nice, you can feel the texture of them, and it's that kind of stimulating your senses through nature that can be really helpful. Again, making sure you eat, sleep, and exercise sensibly. Write down what places, people, and hobbies, activities you most value or most important to you, and then schedule some time into every week to make sure you engage with them, and that's your balance. That comes into this intervention that I'll talk to, or therapy that I'll talk to in a moment. And then challenge, if you get anxious or worried about things, challenge those thoughts, say, hang on, do I need to think like this? Why am I thinking like this? And a very helpful way of doing that can be, to ask yourself, if a friend said they were, bothered by these things, if they were having these anxious thoughts, what would I say to them? Because you often find that you're your own harshest critic, and that if someone else, shared these thoughts, you'd say, you don't need to worry about that. You did that fine, or, that's not going to happen. So making yourself kind of take a sort of external perspective on your problems can often both identify solutions or ways of solving them that you might not have thought of, or if they're kind of guilt, blame related, then it can encourage you to be sort of kinder to yourself. Share, talk to someone you can trust. Don't feel you have to carry everything yourself, and people, like to be helpful. They like to be, to talk and feel that they can contribute. So don't think you're necessarily going to be burdening someone. People want to be helpful and so forth. And sometimes, you might not want to share with your parents, but you could share with a grandparent or uncle or something, or a friend, someone whose opinion you value, who's going to give you sensible advice. And that is the end of my first presentation, and we're just beyond the hour. So yeah, shall we? I'm happy to. Gosh, is it got dark, or is it just my image has got pixelated? I'll just turn the light on. So yes, absolutely. Sort of very happy. Sorry, I realised there's a lot of information in there, and very happy to share my slides afterwards, but also very happy to answer any questions or challenges. Please tell me anything you disagree with. That would be great to hear. Anything that you'd like to challenge or give another perspective on, that would be wonderful too. So yeah.
Okay, ladies, feel free, raise of hands, unmute your mic. Go ahead.
Yes, yeah.
So one question I wanted to ask was, for anxiety, I know people get panic attacks, right? So can panic attacks be detrimental?
Yes. So panic attacks is like an extreme form of anxiety. It's when worries and worrying thoughts get so overwhelming that your brain effectively goes into meltdown. You think, I just can't cope anymore with this. It sort of bobbles over into an actual reaction, physical reaction, if you like, which is, your heart racing, sweating, your facial muscles clenched, and maybe you start crying or you start shouting and vocalizing your anxieties. You sort of, distress, absolutely, and panic attack. And it's, it's challenging sometimes to know how to respond to a panic attack. I mean, they can take different forms. Sometimes panic can appear also, can be accompanied by strong feelings of anger and irritation. So sometimes, it's, you might think, the best thing is to put your arm around someone, give someone a hug, and potentially if they're kind of weepy and so forth, that is. But if they're very agitated or angry as well, then that can be counterproductive. So sometimes when something's panicking, you just kind of need to give them a bit of reassurance, but also a bit of space. It can be quite tricky to judge, but they don't generally, they do come to an end. And you just have to kind of, if you're feeling it's sort of out of your depth of it, then again, and you're in a school situation, the thing is to sort of call an adult, I think, and sort of ask they can help to do a bit. Someone's put in the chat, having a pet. Yes, absolutely. Having pets. So pets are very good therapy, often very kind of good at making people feel less anxious and sad, and motivating as well, because you have to go out and exercise your dog, so it gets you out into the fresh air, which is obviously beneficial as well. But thank you, Abby. That's a good question. Deborah.
Yes, as I heard about having a pet, and you can walk the dog and things like that to combat some of these panic attack or anxiety or things like that. You can, sometimes as you realize that as you have the pet, some people tend to talk to their pets rather than talk to somebody, because maybe they might not trust the person with their problem. But having that dog or cat or the hamster or something like that, they tend to talk to that animal, you know, their pet, with all the great confidence and everything than a person. And that helps. It helps too.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I think, you know, because animals pick up, you know, they're very good, particularly dogs, at sensing, and horses as well, actually, at sensing a person's feeling, at reading, you know, people's faces, expressions and bodily expressions, and responding empathically to that, and sympathetically to that. So a dog doesn't, and sometimes you do just want to talk, you just want to say what you don't necessarily want to hear people, you know, especially telling you what to do in advice, you know. So to have, you know, just an animal who's looking at you affectionately and lovingly and listening whilst you're, you know, you're talking to the point of grief is absolutely very therapeutic, definitely valuable. Yeah, no, that's often comes up, actually, that, you know, the value of pets. Indeed, someone was saying that dogs should be, you know, available on our National Health Service, you know, because it's often more effective than the, you know, than sort of psychological therapies and then drugs and things. So I've got a question from Jewel. Can you shed some? Oh, just need to bring that up again. I just lost it. Can you shed some light on measures and methods a person can use to persuade someone who may have or displaying signs of depression or anxiety to get help? To encourage them to get help? It can be challenging, yeah, absolutely, particularly if there's kind of, if when, you know, if they have sort of, they've internalized, you know, this sort of stigma that, or kind of that maybe they've been surrounded by or heard, you know, voices or opinions previously saying, you know, you should just be able to deal with it yourself, or, you know, this is somehow shameful in ways, feel that. And if they have heard that, and if they have taken it to heart, and then it can be very hard to kind of, to get them to seek help, or they may just be more generally in denial and saying, you know, there's nothing wrong with me, or I can manage this myself, you know. Or they may, as I say, not want to sort of feel that they'd be burdening someone else with it. So there's a whole host of reasons why a person might be anxious to kind of seek help, or and in a professional help. I mean, they might not be able to. There are big waiting lists in the UK. I'm sure there are where you are, and also, you know how, you know, in terms of availability of kind of counselling and sort of professional support. So yeah, I think it can be really challenging, and you can't force the person. You can suggest, and to suggest it too forcibly, I think, might be counterproductive. I think you can just, all you can do is be, you know, a good friend and listen and try and sort of at appropriate points, you know, suggest this. But it's really, yeah, it's I don't think there's an easy answer to that, unfortunately. I think it depends, you know, on the particular individual circumstances. You have to use your kind of best judgment, but sort of be guided by what you know about the person, how they might sort of react to this, and why they might feel anxious about seeking help, and just be there to be supportive as much as you feel able to be, really. And just hope that in time that they kind of come round to sort of being more receptive. Deborah.
When does medication comes in, or at what part, you know, when a person is going through depression, having a nervous breakdown or anxiety, where does the medication come in? Because, I mean, you know, you could go through therapy, you can see a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and all these things. But then there are times when persons have to take medication, and many times they depend on these medications. So when does that come in?
Yeah, an excellent question. I mean, the whole issue of medication with vis-a-vis or psychological talking therapies is a very fraught one, and they're very strong opinions. Both on that a lot of people say, this medication saved my life, quite literally, and there are people who are very strongly against it because they don't see mental illness as having this physical element. So they're suspicious of a drug that they don't understand maybe entirely how it works. They don't see the need to take it if they don't see it as a physical condition. So they see it purely their mental distress as a response to the circumstances that they are in or they've been in the past. And so they think that, psychological and talking is the best way through it. But I mean, in terms of research evidence, it's tricky. I mean, there is obviously that it's something that people are still researching, and new drugs are coming out all the time. The evidence is somewhat mixed, and that drugs are more helpful for some populations, people, some age groups, or with degrees of different types of disorders and degrees of severity than others. We have in the UK, we have these things called NICE guidelines, National Institute for Clinical Excellence guidelines, which sort of advise are sort of recommendations to doctors and clinicians about what to prescribe and when to prescribe things. But it isn't as clear cut as you've got a bacterial infection and you take an antibiotic and that clears it up. I mean, sometimes that's not clear cut either, because you get bacterial strains that are resistant to antibiotics, but you sort of get what I'm saying. So it's tricky, and it's something that's negotiated between the person and the psychiatrist, the prescribing or the GP if they're not being referred to a psychiatrist. Some people find it helpful, others don't. People seem to respond differently to it. But they obviously, drugs go through very strict and rigorous clinical trials before they come to the market. So though they can have side effects, these are not severe typically, or very rarely severe, because otherwise they wouldn't get to go through the clinical trials. So the question whether taking one would be actively harmful, I think that's unlikely as well.
Thank
Leona.
you.
Oh, thanks. Leona, yes.
Miss Arjun, go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Josephine.
Oh, sorry, I forgot I have my daughter's name on it. So
Yeah, sorry, it's Josephine.
I went on there, but I'm still waiting. I believe, in my mind, I believe that praying helps with mental depression, because sometimes I get all these anxiety things. And what I do, I talk to myself, but it's actually God I'm talking to. It sounds crazy if anybody listening, it sounds like I'm talking to myself. But actually it's myself I'm talking to, but I'm talking to God as well. So I talk myself into the feelings. Let's just say I have anxiety feeling. Right now I'm not working, and they owe me my money, and they're not paying it as yet. So whenever the thoughts of how the amount of things you have to do and you're not getting this money, and whenever that come along and it started bothers my mind, I just started talk, and I just started telling myself, listen, you have food on your table, your bills getting paid because my daughter's helping out. Your bills getting paid, you have food on the table. Stop worrying about the other things. The money will come, it have to come, they win it have to come, that kind of way. So like that. And then I say, I have to trust God. You have to trust God, and you have to keep reminding myself like that.
Yeah,
so
no, I think that's,
sense.
Thank you so much for that. No, absolutely. And I think that's I can see why that'd be a very, effective strategy. And I think that's what you do, either in your head or out loud, if it's easier, or to your pets, is to kind of, you have these anxious thoughts, to challenge them. That's part of a common therapeutic technique called cognitive behavioral therapy, where you look at these anxieties and you don't take them at face value, you challenge them. You say, well, really, is that a proportionate and rational worry? Or is it something that's, that I can address you know, I'm able to address in some way positively. I'm able to either it's something that's, you know, I'm worrying about unduly, or is there something practical problem solving I can do to address this rather than worrying about it on and on. And I think faith as well. I mean, personally, I have faith, not everyone does, but I think the broader idea, whether you believe in God, of having a faith that things in the long run will turn out well, and that there is behind everything ultimately some kind of benevolent plan. I mean, and this is not scientific, so don't take this, but I think that can be very powerful for certain people. So I think, certainly for myself, yeah, just speaking from a personal perspective, so I can certainly, understand what you're saying there. Nicole, did you briefly have your hand up?
Yeah, it's like an old proverb that says, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So I think self-care is important. We have to, it helps us to recharge and stop and, you know, take care of our own selves.
Absolutely, that's so important, and not to feel bad about that, not to feel bad about taking that time out to sort of recharge our internal batteries, because, you know, if we neglect ourselves, if we don't practice that self-care, then we're going to run our mental and perhaps physical health down, and we're not going to be able to be as helpful or productive to others. So actually, in looking after yourself and giving yourself time out and self-care is actually not only something that's good for you, it's something that's good for other people and you know, the ones you care for and love. So yeah, absolutely, that's a really good point, Nicole.
So I want to ask a question, please, Philip.
Yeah,
as an organization, we have members across the board. We have very young members, we have members who are around my age, and we have more senior members. So is it that these recommendations, scientific or otherwise, for dealing with mental health run across the board, or are they age specific or demographic specific? What are they, please?
Another really great question. Yeah, I think there's an degree to which they're universal, but I think some of them might apply more to certain age groups than others. So I think your point about, you know, the challenges as a younger person of sticking your neck out and saying, and ignoring fashions and trends and saying, I'm just going to plow my own furrow, is a very good, it's a case in point. Maybe that's more something, you know, that's better for a person. And I think I think that the idea of kind of tailoring or making therapeutic interventions to different groups, if they're by age or by culture, is a really important one. And that's something actually that the sort of research group I'm in, and Professor Lena Geiger, is very interested in as well, about how we can make these kind of therapies that we develop speak better to different cultural groups. So cultural groups maybe where mental health is more stigmatized, or particular strong conceptions or views about that. But just, you know, coming down to the level of language used. So it's all, the majority of interventions tend to be written by Americans or Western Europeans. And so all the language in there is kind of, all the cultural references within that are very Anglo-centric. Or even, you know, or examples of practices, you know, if you're suggesting about hobbies and activities or ways of doing things, that you know, they might not be so relevant to other cultural groups. And something when we were scoping this out is that, you know, UK society, for better or worse, it is quite secular, but for certain groups, minority groups within that, within the UK, it's very important, like Muslim groups, and faith is hugely important. And the kind of models that come up with, they kind of don't address that aspect, though it's a really important part of these people's lives. So yeah, or they're kind of suggesting activities that might be culturally problematic or difficult for certain groups to engage in. So Yeah, I think absolutely, Joe. I think, yeah, some of these underlying principles are quite universal, but when you go more down into the details, and particularly the examples of things or particular strategies that recommending, it can, yeah, it does need to be more tailored. Yeah.
Thank you, Philip. Does anyone have any anecdotes, stories, suggestions, any experiences that they might want to share with us?
That's fine. If not, I can deliver Lena's presentation, which is a bit of a slightly shorter one, but it's if people are up for that, I don't want to keep everyone too long, but if you've got a bit of time and people would like that. It's essentially, it's an introduction to there are a couple of short videos, if I can manage to work out how to play them. It's explaining this this form of therapy, which is called behavioural activation, which is the one that we're trialling in amongst adolescents in schools in the UK at the moment. And it's all about really getting the person, it's for young people with mild to moderate depression. It's all about helping them to get from a position where they're lacking in motivation and energy and feeling low and sort of spending their days isolated or in their room and not really doing anything, to get them to get active, to introduce activities, hobbies into their lives again, ways of connecting with other people through creating a diary into which they schedule things. So I can talk a bit about that if that would be helpful. Joy's nodding, so I'll just share. I'll see if I can make the video work first. Now it's sometimes a little tricky on Thingamabob, but I'll try it, and we'll see if we can work this out. So share screen. Share screen. I can share audio as well. Somewhere it lets you share audio as well, but we'll see if we can do this. The video settings. We'll have a look. I think this isn't going to work, but let's try.
We're pleased you're taking part in.
Are people hearing anything?
You will learn about
Yes,
behavior.
Mr.
Is everyone hearing?
You'll learn
Yes.
why to meet a professional during a session.
Yes.
The sessions will help you to understand low mood. You'll learn to introduce rewarding activities to key areas of your life. And you'll learn to tackle avoidance and isolation. Each session lasts between 30 and 45 minutes. You'll meet with a professional. They'll support you to learn and do things that can help with low mood. You can attend on your own or with a trusted adult. Behavioural activation has 5 modules. Sometimes you'll complete a module in a single session. Sometimes they'll be done in 2 or more sessions. You'll learn about behavioural activation strategies. And you'll put these strategies into practice. Here are 2 examples of things you'll learn in practice. How to build a calendar of rewarding activities. How to spot unhelpful activities that bring you down. You will plan takeaway activities to do between sessions, such as monitoring your activities with a calendar. and giving each activity a score for pleasure, achievement, and connection. We'll call this a PAC score. How will you feel after a session? Sometimes you'll feel like it's easy to make progress. Sometimes you'll feel like things are harder than you realized. This is expected. We've planned for it. We look forward to supporting you. Behavioural activation. Feeling good through rewarding activities.
So that's one of the videos, and that's the kind of introduction to the kind of this behavioural activation intervention that we're running. Gives you a bit of an overview of it. I do have a few slides as well. Yeah, just to explain a bit. So yes, behavioural activation. So yeah, this kind of diagram explains how it works really, or the kind of primary principle of it. So the idea is to lift the person's mood, feelings and mood, by getting them to do more things and more activities and activities that are purposeful and worthwhile and meaningful for them, and then connect them with other people and things that they value, and then to minimize what known as unhelpful activities, so avoiding people, procrastination, which is putting things off. I'll do this tomorrow. I can't summon the energy to do it today. Rumination, which again is linked kind of to anxiety. It's about sort of dwelling on kind of negative past experiences and thinking, this person doesn't like me, or this or I can't. This thought of maths in school tomorrow is just horrible. So those sort of thoughts going around in your head, which it's unproductive thinking, because you're not going to do anything by just stressing over it. So it's to pull you out of that, and then withdraw. Obviously, it's just kind of withdrawing from people and doing things. So how it works is there are two sort of steps. You identify things that you want to do during the week, and you put them into a calendar. And those things that you do it's good for them to be a mix. We recognise they can't all be things that are purely pleasurable. That there are chores that you need to do, whether it's kind of tidying the room or helping cook supper, dinner. And these are important too, so it's important to put those in. And then some things might be sort of longer term goals that you're working towards through sort of gradual steps. So maybe learning an instrument, or practicing to get into a sports team. And then this thing called Life Pie, which I'll come to in a moment, which is about looking at what's different areas of life and what is valuable in those. So once you've scheduled your activities into the week, when you do those activities, you score them, and you score them according to how much pleasure they give you, a sense of achievement. So for something might not be immediately pleasurable at the time, like doing your homework, or but afterwards you feel, oh great, I've got that done and I've done a reasonable job of it. That's out of the way, that's great. And then connection, so things, the degree of connection that you get to other people, but it could be to pets as well. You could be sort of, it could be walking the dog, so you feel a connection to your pets, so to any people you value, really. And then you're looking to identify those activities that scored highly in terms of giving you either a lot of pleasure or a big sense of achievement or sense of connection, and kind of eliminating those that don't give you any of those things, because chances are they're not that worthwhile. If it's not giving you any pleasure, if you're not getting any sense of achievement from it, and it's not bringing you into any positive contact with anyone, then maybe you want to think about whether you want to keep doing it. And this is just what a calendar would look like. So the young person it's just very simple, 7 days a week and then divided into 3 times a day. So they just add in there. These are the activities, again, what I was saying about things needing to be a mixture of pleasures, things you need to do, and then goals, return goals. And then the life pie is the different areas of your life. And we sort of, again, you can see there's 3 big areas, and then these are subdivided into smaller areas. And again, this was where, we sort of ran this past a Muslim group, and they said, where's faith and religion in that? So, yeah, so so it's a case in point of needing to kind of these things to be culturally tailored. And when you're kind of scoring those activities you're doing, saying, again, what I was saying about the amount of pleasure they give, the achievement they give, and the connection. And in order to do that scoring, you ask yourself questions like, what did I do? With whom did I do it? Where did I do it? When did I do it? So this is what the calendar would look like, essentially. So you put in your activities, some of them school related, some of them pleasure, gaming, some of them chores like Saturday morning, washing your clothes. And then you once you've done them, you score them. You give them these pleasure, achievements, and connection scores. And then you look at you try and work out which things scored highly and highlight those, which highlighted in this case in yellow. And then there are other things in grey which weren't scored highly. And you think about those, well, are those things that I really want to carry on doing? So lying in bed till 1 in the afternoon on Sunday didn't really do anything for you, though you wanted to do it at the time. So you think maybe next time I'll make the effort to get up, because I might not feel it at the time, but at the end of the day, I'm going to feel better for it. And then other things like school break on Tuesday, well, maybe that was because you didn't, you were just on your own. So maybe next time you sort of meet up with chat to a few friends, and then maybe it's more pleasurable. So the great things are really things that you either sort of cut down or reduce, or you maybe think about doing differently. Dinner alone is another one. If you'd had dinner with somebody, maybe you would have enjoyed it more. And then once you've done this for a few weeks, you build up what's called an activities bank. So you identify things in each of these different areas of your life that are pleasurable, that are meaningful to you, and that are sources of pleasure, that are things that might not give you pleasure at the time, but are important things to do in order just, part of transitioning to being an responsible adult, really, but just necessary to keep everything ticking over and keep on top of things and stop things getting out of control, because you might not like cleaning or washing, but if it never got done, then you'd be overwhelmed by not having any clothes and a filthy house, and you wouldn't like that either. And then goals, as I say, these step things towards bigger steps you take towards achieving something more long term. And then there's these ideas of things that can come in the way. So, and Lena calls these black holes, which are this sort of avoiding doing things, putting off doing things. Grey clouds, unhelpful activities, things that you want to do at the time but aren't, particularly helpful, productive, or even really pleasurable. So, staying in bed because you're tempted, but afterwards you just feel rubbish, or just scrolling through social media because you're bored, but at the end of that you just feel maybe that hasn't done anything for you either. It hasn't really given you any reward either. And then red zones are these things that might be enjoyable, but it can be addictive or harmful. So, possibly things like self-harm or smoking, things like that, activities like that. And so bad for your health, psychologically and mentally. So there's a bit more detail on these particular things, on the black holes: procrastinating, ruminating, again, brooding over past problems or unfortunate events. Grey clouds. Yeah, distracting activities. Mirroring, that's an interesting one. Listening to a sad song if you feel sad, well, that's maybe debatable. Sometimes it can be therapeutic to sort of lean into your emotion and then you come out of it and feeling more positive. But certainly if you're feeling depressed, watching upsetting news is probably not going to be the best thing. Yeah, and having losing bursting out and having strong upsetting emotional reactions. And then these different types of problematic behavior. I suppose energy drinks, in moderation are all right, but I think it's just this anxiety about if you're having high sugar and caffeinated drinks all the time, it's not healthy. A lot of academics seem to run on coffee, as far as I know, so they should take more notice of that. Nice. And then, so we ran this initial study with 20 young people where we're given this intervention. And then we, as you say, we got some quite positive feedback from them about how they'd found it helpful. I'll just let you read through some of those quotes. It's always slightly difficult to tell whether the benefit is coming from having someone to talk to with a sympathetic idea and sort of who's encouraging and motivating, or whether it's the other things as well. But what we're doing with this study is to kind of compare delivering our intervention against delivering what's called standard care. So what the person would normally receive, which some other type of face-to-face intervention. We're seeing that if our particular thing of having scheduling out and scoring activities is more beneficial than other approaches. Makes people, it's more effective in improving mental health. And if anyone's interested, we have a massive open online course which is open to everyone across the world, and people have quite liked it so far, as you can see. Got some good reviews. So and it's free. It's free to join, and I think you have sort of 3 weeks or so that it's sort of free to complete it. And thank you very much. That's the end of that.
Excuse me, Mr. Philip. Is it possible that you can send a link for the course in the chat?
Oh, good idea. Yes, absolutely. I'll do that now. Very good idea, yes. Yes, I've got that open somewhere.
While Mr. Philip is doing that, does anyone else have any more further questions?
Did everyone get that? Did I send it to everyone, that link? Has that worked? Oh, it said Meet a Girl Guides Association. No, it hasn't gone through to everyone, has it? I do need to do everyone in meeting. Right, I'll try that again.
Don't worry, I sent it on.
We got it.
Thank you. Oh, thank you very much for your kind comment, Leona. That's great.
So I want to sorry, I should have raised my hand. My apologies for that. In terms of introducing a discussion on mental health, is there a recommended age, or can we go as young as the age of the child? For example, someone who's 3 years old, 4 years old, is that appropriate? Is that possible?
Good question. Certainly in the UK at the moment, they're introducing discussion of well-being, of the importance of emotion, of how to be keep happy and kind of emotionally well into primary school now. So it's not it's obviously the approach is different the language used is different, and rather it wouldn't be specifically talking about at a very young age about specific mental health. Well, you might talk about worries, things that worry you or things that make you feel sad, but you wouldn't use mostly questions like sort of depression or terms like that. But or talk about more severe mental illnesses at that stage, because the young person probably wouldn't have, that wouldn't be the right age. But I think it's never too young to talk about, about your feelings and the importance of, if you're worried about something, of sharing your worries and giving little strategies to help you kind of manage your feelings. So if you're very upset and angry, then just doing some breathing exercises or count to 10, or I think those kind of little tips, I think, or understanding that of how we as human beings are emotional creatures, and sometimes our emotions get a bit out of control or make us think in some ways which aren't helpful. So yeah, I think it's never too young maybe to do that. You just have to be, careful about how you pitch it. I suppose the exact way in which you pitch it. I don't know what do other people think. I'm no expert on that. But I know it's in the UK it's trying to sort of introduce it earlier. Any other thoughts? I mean, is it in the curriculum at all in Trinidad and Tobago at the moment? Did you have any kind of, maybe not directly lessons dealing with mental health, but dealing with, well-being more generally, or kind of emotional health and that sort of thing?
Do we have any teachers on the chat? We'd like to hear your feedback, please, if possible.
Yes, we have teachers on the chat. We also have a psychologist on the chat.
Oh, brilliant.
So can any of our teachers who are on the chat advise us, or the other person, the person who spoke? I see Nicole has a hand up. Thank you, Nicole.
We in association with the Ministry of Education, the School Service and Support Division, the SSSD, this is their area. And I know they would have psychologists assigned to them as well that would work with students who have mental issues.
Thanks, Nicole. That's very helpful. But is there any more general sort of education, though, of rather than just engaging with students who have difficulties, just more on a preventative, if you like, an awareness raising, or is that something that's maybe an area that might happen in the future? Yvette?
Hi, okay, I am no longer in the system, but I've noticed, like with my grandchildren, they address emotions. They talk about happy and what makes you happy, and that's a general thing. And I think that's a good preventative measure. When I noticed it, I felt, oh yeah, that's a nice way to go.
Thank you. No, that's good. That's very helpful. And I know it's only very recently that mental health has been. When I was at school, as I was saying, there wasn't anything really. We had something called personal social health education, but it's Yvette, sorry, you've got something else to say?
No, sorry. I was just trying to put down my hand. Sorry.
Oh, right, you were putting down your hands. Yeah. So yeah, we had this, but the health education that we received was much more about physical health and sexual health. There wasn't anything that I can remember around mental health. But I think that's changing. That's changed within the last 5 to 10 years, and is, I think, a change, much needed change. So yeah. That's great. Just any other thoughts? We're approaching, well, it's 4 o'clock here. It's 12 o'clock with you, isn't it? So I was quite surprised that we're only four hours behind. I thought it'd be, it's got the whole of the Atlantic Ocean in between us. It would be more than 4 hours, but it might be because it's our British winter time. So it might normally be 5 hours, but because our clocks went back, as they're called, it's probably just 4 hours. Which means we have an hour less light in the evening. So it's dark, getting dark by 4 o'clock now, which is and sort of light at about 8 o'clock. So it's quite a short day. Yeah.
So, question just now, let me raise my.
Ah, yes. Yes, Joy. Sorry.
Sorry, was there anyone else who wanted to ask before I ask? You can go ahead. Were any hands up? Okay. Because it's approaching winter in the UK, is it that you expect to hear more cases of adverse mental health, or is it that the cases won't spike as much in terms of the weather? Because I believe weather is a factor. And also because it's the holiday period where people are supposed to be festive and enjoying themselves. And that can be a serious period of depression for people, running from, I think, November up until the end of Valentine's Day, somewhere there.
Yeah. I think, yeah, there is this seasonally affected disorder, which quite a lot of people can experience because, you know, sunlight is linked to boosting this brain chemical called serotonin, which is one of the chemicals in your brain that kind of keeps you feeling happy, induces feelings of happy and welfare and contentment. So it can be a challenging period for people. Whether I think it's not a sort of direct correlation in terms of there are more people necessarily diagnosed or suddenly reporting with sort of, I suppose more people might, you know, see a GP or report feeling depressed or anxious, but I think more serious, you know, mental illnesses are more rooted in more kind of fundamental kind of bad things that have happened or kind of going on, or have other kind of causes that are more kind of longer term or aren't sort of seasonally dependent. But I think, yeah, certainly the kind of the short days can make things worse because, yeah, sunlight is a natural antidepressant, if you like. And certainly when you, I mean, I'm not so familiar with the Caribbean, though. It looks lovely from all the photos I've seen, but certainly the kind of Mediterranean where they have a little more sunlight and it's a bit warmer. I think the winters are a lot more pleasant than ours. But there's this thing also, particularly in Scandinavia, which is called, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's like a way of countering that depression by this idea of coziness. So it's black and cold outside, so you can put the candles on inside and lights and just make your interiorly warm, welcoming, and have a big cup of hot chocolate and just, you know, have a rug, curl up with a rug and watch it comforting. It's about sort of comforting and self-care during this kind of bleak period and sort of getting a sense of pleasure from the fact that you're warm and cozy inside and where it might be sort of cold and black outside, you know, dark outside. So yeah, I think that's sort of something. Yes, thank you. Or Hugo, or however it's pronounced. That's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very, very much, Philip. You have given us such a wonderful knowledge base from which to bolster on a wealth of information on mental health. Whatever we didn't learn before, we know now, and whatever we have learned, we've certainly reinforced it today. And I must acknowledge all our members who are present today, whether they are brownies, guides, junior guides, senior guides, ranger guides, or division commissioners in particular. Let me also acknowledge our Chief Commissioner, Ms. Jacqueline Dolly, who has been present ever since we started. So good morning to you, ma'am. And ladies, thank you very much for staying the course. We really appreciate what you have done today, your participation, will help our association as a safe space for young girls and women, particularly as we want to become leaders in our communities and in our country. And indeed, we want to be knowledgeable about this issue because, as Philip mentioned, it impacts not just the individual and the community, but the entire country and indeed the globe in terms of productivity and general wellness. So again, Philip and all the GGATT participants, thank you very, very much. And now I turn over to Miss Abia Smith, who will close us off. And thank you as well to Angela, who has been very helpful this morning and always. Thank you very, very much. Over to you, Abia.
On behalf of the Girl Guides Association of Trinidad and Tobago, I would like to thank Dr. Philip for taking his time out to come and properly educate us about mental health. It was really informative and fun to learn. And I assure you that we will take this information on to others.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really nice. And it's been such a pleasure to be with you. And thank you so much for your warm invitation and your wonderful engagement, all the fantastic questions you've asked. And it's been a real pleasure, and just wishing you all the very best. So thank you so much. Great opportunity. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for the
Let's just pose for a
information.
quick
Bye,
photo,
everyone.
please. Angela, are we doing the photos? Oh, he went.